All right, today on Agile with Norm, I'm going to be talking about boosting your skill set as a product owner. So these are some things you can focus on and do to become a better product owner for your team. All right, so let's talk about the product owner role. So the role of the product owner is to maximize the value of the product, and they do that with the Scrum team. So anyone doing the product owner role needs to be empowered to make product decisions, and they need to be comfortable and capable of doing that. They also need to have a product goal. They need to have a roadmap, a vision for their product, where they want to take it. They need to create and manage product backlog items. They need to prioritize the work, right? They need to know what's the most valuable thing, what's going to move the needle the most, what should we work on first as a team. They need to do stakeholder management. You're going to have, as a product owner, for a popular product, you're going to have lots of people saying, hey, this is a priority, this is a priority. You're going to need to manage all of those stakeholders who want something to be done with your product. And then you're going to need to be able to do lots and lots of analysis, right? You're going to be looking at data, you're going to be considering the stakeholders, maybe customer feedback, surveys. There's all kinds of data you can take and you can just analyze to figure out what we should do next as a team. So as a product owner, those are a lot of the responsibilities that I typically see a product owner doing. All right, so I typically like to recommend the following areas for product owners to focus on. And if they're weak in any of these areas, these are something I would recommend that they would skill up in. So first up, we have facilitation, then we have workshop techniques, stakeholder management, backlog management, Scrum responsibilities, value analysis, and then just following up on things. Specifically, our product increment, the work we've just implemented, following up on how that went. So let's jump into these and talk about them. So first up, I like to recommend that you focus on facilitation if you're not, comfortable facilitating meetings. And facilitation is really the art of being able to pull information out of others. So it's not that you necessarily have the answer, but it's that you know how to get others to give you that answer. And they're not going to necessarily listen to you just because you're a product owner. They're going to listen to you because you're good at facilitation and they trust that you can get them there. Facilitation is important because you won't always have the answer, right? I've never met a product owner that has every single answer. A lot of times you're working with different stakeholders, and that requires bringing them together, doing some sort of workshopping, pulling information out of them so you can then analyze it and figure out the best course of action for your product. If you're not good at facilitation, I recommend checking out the book Unlocking the Magic of Facilitation, 11 Key Concepts You Didn't Know. And it is a great book. I've read it. I learned some really great techniques in it. Strongly recommend it. So a good follow-up to facilitation is workshop techniques. So when it comes to Agile, you're going to typically have to bring a bunch of people together and kind of pull requirements or information out of them and make a plan. And a good way to do that is these two techniques listed here. And these are techniques that I will usually, if I'm starting off a new Agile team, I will sit down with a product owner and I will show them how to run these types of workshops. And I will maybe help them run the first one, because these are just two really powerful techniques that are great for product owners to make plans. So the first one is story mapping. So the idea here is you kind of create like a little narrative story on how people use your product. And then from there you can branch down into the different parts of that story and make user story cards for it. So it's a really great way to go about things if you can put together this narrative of how people are going to use your product. The second one here is impact mapping. And this is a great technique when you have a big goal and you want to take that goal, lay out who your key players are in it, which they call actors, and then talk about like the behavior changes you want to see in that, and then like the technology changes that you need to make those behaviors change. This is a good technique if you're starting out with a big goal and you don't really have any idea of how to move forward with that goal, and you just want to brainstorm ideas. This technique will also get you to story cards, and it's a pretty awesome technique. A little different than story mapping. Both of these, you can find these on YouTube. If you don't know how to do them, you can find some good tutorials. When it comes to impact mapping, I recommend checking out the book I have listed there under number 1, Impact Mapping, Making a Big Impact with Software Products and Projects. And the cool thing with both of these techniques is that they lend themselves to being iterative, incremental, and being agile really well. You can actually figure out your MVP with these techniques. All right, and our third item is stakeholder management. So this is timely following, workshop techniques, because a lot of the times you will get some stakeholders who are just unhappy and they're just going to be noisy and they're going to make running a workshop really difficult for you as a product owner. So a lot of ways to deal with that kind of behavior is good stakeholder management. If you have somebody who is just really not happy and they're just being disruptive, this is when I would strongly recommend, hey, this person's clearly not feeling heard. There's something wrong that they're being so noisy. This is a time I would recommend setting up a reoccurring meeting with that individual. And then you can deal with them one-on-one basis and say, hey, I hear you, but we're going to do this. We'll do your thing later. You can be a little bit more diplomatic and blunt in those one-on-one meetings, and people will feel less offended when they don't get their way. So number 3 on this list is keep the right people informed, right? If somebody's been waiting for something forever, make sure you're keeping them on your radar, you're keeping them informed, saying, hey, we know you got this thing's ahead of you in the backlog, but we're coming, we haven't forgotten you. Just keeping touch points with them. And then another part of stakeholder management is being able to influence people, right? You're going to have to be able to tell people why their thing can't be done because something else is more valuable for you. So working on how to influence people, how to be diplomatic, that's a big part of stakeholder management, something worth focusing on as a product owner. All right, so backlog management is another thing that I often recommend that product owners are focused on. You want to have your backlog reflecting your plan or roadmap for your product, and it should also relate to your vision for the product as a whole. So obviously the things that are in your roadmap that are at the beginning of your roadmap, things you want to do earlier, those should be the things that are in the top of your backlog, and they should be well defined. You should know the who, what, and why for those items. And you should be able to really fill in all of the information that the team's going to need to do that work. And now an important thing to keep track of here is that you're not telling the team how to do the work, you're just telling them the what, the who, and the why. And that's all the information the team needs really to be able to take that and make a plan. Obviously, if you can provide some more details, that's good. If there are things that you specifically don't want, list that in the item. But you don't want to get overly descriptive on how the team should do the work. You want to leave them some room on how to figure out how to get that done. After all, they are doing the work. They're probably in a good position to determine that. Next up, you should have it ready for planning, right? Scrum works in sprints. You're going to be working often, I see it be a 2-week sprint, so you'll be working in 2-week chunks. So you want to have a backlog that's really going to support a 2-week sprint. You want to have enough work in there to keep the team busy for 2 weeks, a little extra at least, ready to go. And then, with your backlog management, you want to make sure you're providing the team what it needs to do the work, right? So if you have a team that's working, with a certain technology, there might be something that they need. Maybe they need for this piece of technology has lots of different APIs, and there's different business owners of each API, and for each one of those that they're working on, they would like to know who owns that, so they can touch base with them if needed. So if you know that information and the team wants that would be something good for you to put in there as a product owner. So you should try to figure out everything that the team needs from you as a product owner and make sure you're putting that into your backlog. And the last thing worth mentioning on backlog management is acceptance criteria, right? You want to have that who, what, and why, and then you want to have the items that are needed to be complete for you to consider this piece of work done. That's a really important piece of information for your team, and it's going to help them really scope out the work in that story card. So next up is Scrum responsibilities. This is a big one I like to stress with product owners. First up on my list here is attend the events, right? You have an agile team, there are all these different events. You really want to attend those events. They're important for the team, the whole agile framework. And if you attend them, things will just be much smoother. Even if it's not, this Scrum team isn't your technical real team, you want to make this feel like a team. And so attending those events is definitely one way to make that happen. Next up is prioritizing work, right? You are the product owner. You are supposed to be making decisions about the product. So you need to be able to prioritize when things come up. If something breaks and your team looks at it and says, hey, this really isn't a break. This is just, somebody saying it's a break, but maybe it's like a design flaw. What do you think? You as a product owner need to be able to play interference for the team there. You should be able to go talk to that person and say, hey, look, this is a minor issue compared to this great chunk of value we're about to implement. So we're going to stay focused on that and deal with your thing after. So that's a big part of your thing is prioritizing work, the backlog and then things that come up. Next is bring energy and excitement to the team, right? You're the product owner. If you can't bring this awesome energy and excitement about what the team's going to be working on, then you can expect the team to have that energy and excitement. It starts with you as a product owner, so make sure you're bringing that to the team. Next up is be a peer. Again, you are part of a Scrum team. When it comes to Scrum, whether you're the Scrum Master, product owner, or a developer role, none of these roles are the boss of the other. You're all peers. You all have responsibility and commitments to make it work. So just remember, you are a peer with everyone on the team, not a boss. So be a team member, be part of the team, not the boss. And then next, represent the team, right? You're going to be dealing with a lot of stakeholders. You're going to have management always looking and seeing if you're doing work, making progress, being successful, creating value. You want to represent the team and show that off. You are the person in charge of maximizing the value, so you need to be able to really show that off and talk about the value you're creating as a team. And this is a big part of Scrum, and as a product owner, you need to realize that your company has taken time and resources and made a Scrum team. They're making a big commitment to this product. So you as a product owner need to make that commitment as well and do the Scrum responsibilities so your team can be successful. Another area that I often recommend that product owners familiarize themselves with or get good at is value analysis. And the reason why is that you are the funnel of work for the Scrum team, right? The work's going to go through you, and you're either going to say, hey, this is valuable, we're going to add it to our backlog, our to-do list, or hey, this is junk. We are never going to be able to justify working on this work. It's going in the trash can. So you need to figure out how to do value analysis and get a good feeling of what's going to be valuable, what's not. So one thing I like to stress and recommend with product owners is that they feel comfortable saying no. They have to be able to say no to work. That's one of the Scrum values. It's an important one. Next, you need to recognize as a product owner that value comes in more than one flavor, right? It's not just the thing that's going to give you the most, return on your investment. There are things like especially when it comes to like technical products, there's things we call technical debt. Things that are, maybe this was coded bad and it's not as efficient as it can be, or maybe there's just like 1,000 pages of code. And if you took time to redo some of that stuff, maybe that 1,000 goes down to 200. And then guess what? Changes in the future become faster. So that way it means whenever you do new work, you're going to get that work done faster and receive value faster. So that's just a different form of value, right? It's not a huge return on your investment immediately, but it is something that's going to make you more valuable over time. So that's something to keep in mind. Value comes in more than one form. And then last up here, if you're struggling with justifying value, there are methods out there. There's one called Moscow. There's one called WizGIF. You can YouTube or Google these two methods and find lots of information out there. And there are others out there. So if you're struggling with value analysis and you don't know how do I determine if this piece of work is better than this piece of work, you can actually put some data behind it. And so that way, if you're really struggling with convincing stakeholders, maybe you say, hey, look, we've got a formula. your work, when we put it into the formula, it's just not as valuable as others. So it's going to be here in the list. We'll get to it when we get to it. All right, and last on our list is follow up. So, as a product owner, you always want to be going back and reflecting on things, right? That's part of Scrum, seeing how things went, learning from it, and getting better. So following up on a release, your latest product increment is pretty important. We want to analyze and see, how is our product being received by customers? Is it generating the right data? Is it successful? Does it make people happy? Are people buying it more? You want to go and look at everything you can to see if you moved the needle in the right direction. And this is really important, because if you didn't move the needle in the right direction and you were planning on your next sprint, further, advancing what didn't work, it's probably a good time to hit the brakes and say, all right, we got to reanalyze and figure out a different plan here, because what we got isn't working for some reason. So when following up, I always recommend, looking at any metrics you have, making sure you're considering customer feedback. If you do surveys or anything like that, that's a good way to look at a release. Talk to your stakeholders, right? If you thought you made something that was gonna, save them, 10 clicks, did you really save them 10 clicks? Are things faster? Are things better? Is there problems? Make sure you're talking to your stakeholders and making sure your release went as expected. And then lastly, follow up with your Scrum team, right? Your Scrum team, these are individuals that are pretty talented and, they know how to develop your product. So they know a thing or two about your product. So make sure, after a release, you're following up with them too and getting their feedback. But the most important thing is just make sure you're doing something that when you release the work, you're looking at it and making sure that you were successful and headed in the right direction. So that way you can either continue to move further in the right direction, or you can, adjust your plan as needed. All right, so that brings us to the end of the video today. Hopefully you figured out some things to focus on as a product owner and help you get better. If I missed some things or you disagree with things, please comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Like, subscribe, comment. I'd appreciate any feedback, just like any Agile enthusiast would. And have a great day, everybody.